The morning sun cast a golden hue over the streets of Philadelphia as I stood by my apartment window, sipping my coffee. Today was supposed to be a turning point, the day I officially secured my future. After years of struggle, I had finally landed my dream job as a senior financial analyst at Kensington & Moore, one of the most prestigious investment firms in the city. "Mom, today's the big day, right?" came a small voice behind me. I turned to see my 10-year-old daughter, Lily, still in her pajamas, her curly brown hair a tangled mess. She climbed onto the chair beside me, resting her chin on my shoulder. I smiled and brushed a few strands of hair from her face. "Not really, sweetheart. Just some final paperwork and an office tour. But yes, today's important." Lily grinned. "You're gonna be amazing." Her confidence in me made my heart swell. I had spent the past decade juggling single motherhood and my career, taking night classes, working thankless jobs, and clawing my way up in an industry that didn't make room for people like me. Every sacrifice had led to this moment. As I prepared breakfast, my thoughts drifted to my mother, Evelyn Carter, a former executive assistant at a major corporation. She had spent 3 decades mastering office politics and networking with the city's elite. But while she had been a powerhouse in the business world, she had never been the nurturing type at home, especially after my younger sister, Vanessa, was born. Vanessa was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I had been forced to prove my worth every step of the way, Vanessa had been handed everything. She never held a steady job or finished college, yet my mother doted on her as if she were a prodigy. "Are we going to Grandma's tonight?" Lily asked, licking jam off her fingers. I hesitated. Yeah, I need to tell her about my job. The truth was, I wasn't looking forward to it. My mother had a habit of downplaying my achievements, and Vanessa, she thrived on tearing me down. But no matter how uncomfortable it made me, I still felt obligated to share the news. Lily beamed. "I want to show Grandma my new drawing." I forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart." Deep down, I knew my mother wouldn't pay much attention to it. She barely acknowledged Lily, her outdated beliefs about single mothers seeping into how she treated my daughter. And Vanessa, she'd probably make a snide remark about how I had ruined my life by having a child too young. I shook off the unease and glanced at the clock. "All right, kiddo, time to get ready for school." After dropping Lily off, I arrived at Kensington & Moore, staring up at the towering glass building. This was it, the culmination of years of sacrifice. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. That evening, I picked up Lily, and we drove to my mother's house. As we neared the driveway, I took a steadying breath. "No matter what Grandma or Aunt Vanessa say, don't let it bother you, okay?" Lily nodded. "I know, Mom. You're amazing, and I don't care what they say." Her words gave me strength. I rang the doorbell, bracing myself. A week passed in a blur. I was preparing for my first day at work when my phone rang. Seeing Kensington & Moore's name on the screen, I answered with a smile. "Hello, this is Amelia Carter." A hesitant male voice responded. "Miss Carter, this is David Langley from Human Resources. I wanted to confirm something with you. We received word that you were declining the position due to personal circumstances." I froze. "What?" "No, that's a mistake. I never declined anything. We received a formal request from your mother, Evelyn Carter, stating you would be unable to take the position due to family obligations." My stomach twisted into knots. My mother said, "What?" She also recommended Vanessa Carter for the role instead. My breath caught in my throat. My mother had gone behind my back again. "There's been a huge misunderstanding," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll come in immediately to clear this up." Hanging up, my hands trembled with rage. Evelyn had sabotaged me. "Lily, I need you to stay with Miss S. Jacobs tonight, okay? I have to take care of something." My daughter's eyes filled with worry. "Mom, what's wrong?" I forced a reassuring smile. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. I just need to talk to Grandma." But deep down, I knew this wasn't just talking. This was war. I drove to my mother's house at breakneck speed, my grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I reached the front door, I didn't bother knocking, I pounded on it. Within seconds, Vanessa opened it, smirking. Well, big sister, what brings you here?" she drawled. "Where's Mom?" I snapped, pushing past her. In the living room, Evelyn sat calmly, sipping tea. She looked up and smiled. "Amelia, dear, what's with the dramatic entrance?" I clenched my fists. You called Kensington and Moore and told them I was declining the job. Then you recommended Vanessa? She sighed, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. Oh, that. Yes, I simply made a decision in your best interest. That job would have been too demanding for a single mother. Vanessa is a much better fit. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. You had no right. That was my job, my future. Vanessa leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Honestly, Amelia, you should be thanking Mom. You wouldn't have lasted a month there. Something inside me snapped. Enough. You may have gotten away with undermining me before, but I will not let you steal my career. Evelyn's expression didn't change. The decision has already been made, dear. Vanessa starts next week. Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I turned on my heel and stormed out. Sitting in my car, I gripped the steering wheel, my entire body shaking. I had spent my whole life being pushed aside, told I wasn't enough. But not this time. This time, I was going to fight back, and I was going to win. I sat in my car, my pulse pounding in my ears. The nerve, the sheer arrogance. My mother had spent years undermining me, but this was a whole new level. I had worked myself to the bone for that position, sacrificed sleep, time, and energy, all while raising Lily alone. And she had stolen it from me with a single phone call. No, not this time. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Kensington and Moore had to hear the truth from me directly. I wasn't about to let my mother and Vanessa rewrite my story. I started the car and headed straight to their office. By the time I reached the reception desk, my anger had cooled into something far more dangerous: determination. I need to speak with David Langley, I said, forcing my voice to stay level. The receptionist, a young woman with sharp eyes and a professional smile, typed into her computer. Do you have an appointment? It's urgent. Tell him it's about the senior analyst position. She hesitated before picking up the phone. One moment. Minutes later, David Langley stepped into the lobby, his expression cautious. He was a tall man in his late 40s, with graying hair and the weary look of someone who had seen more corporate drama than he cared for. Miss Carter, he said, shaking my hand. I must say, this situation is highly unusual. That's an understatement, I replied, barely containing my frustration. Can we talk in private? He led me to a sleek conference room with a glass wall that overlooked the city. I assume you're here about the declined offer. I took a deep breath. I never declined. His brows knitted together. Your mother? My mother is not me. She had no right to speak on my behalf. He rubbed his chin. That complicates things. I can prove it, I said. You have my email on file. Have I sent any official correspondence declining the job? He pulled out his phone, tapping through his inbox. After a moment, he sighed. No, you haven't, because I didn't. His jaw tightened. Your mother spoke with upper management. She claimed you had personal conflicts preventing you from taking the job. She lied, I said flatly, and recommended Vanessa, who, let's be honest, doesn't have the qualifications. Langley exhaled sharply, clearly torn. I'll need to bring this up with Robert Blackwell, our CEO. I swallowed. The CEO? I hadn't expected this to escalate so quickly. Give me a moment, Langley said before stepping out. I sat there gripping the armrests of my chair. This was it. Either Kensington and Moore corrected this mistake, or I'd be forced to fight another way. After what felt like an eternity, Langley returned. Blackwell wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. I nodded. I'll be here. As I left the office, my hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. I wasn't just going to fight back, I was going to win. That night, I picked up Lily from Miss S. Jacobs' house. She ran up to me, her small arms wrapping around my waist. Mom, are you okay? I kissed the top of her head. I will be, sweetheart. She pulled back and frowned. Did Grandma do something bad again? I hesitated. Let's just say she tried to make a decision for me that she had no right to make. Lily's eyes darkened in a way that reminded me of myself. That's not fair. No, it's not. I brushed a curl from her face. But don't worry. I'm fixing it. She studied my face, then nodded. Good. We went home, had dinner, and I tucked her into bed. As I sat on the couch, exhaustion weighed on me, but I refused to let it win. I spent the next few hours researching employment laws and company policies. If Kensington and Moore refused to reinstate me, I needed to be ready. The next morning, I dressed sharply, my best blazer and heels making me feel as unshakable as I needed to be. I arrived at the office, my heart hammering as I was led to a private executive meeting room. Robert Blackwell was already there, flanked by Langley and 2 other senior executives. He was a commanding presence, his suit crisp, his silver hair neatly combed back. "Miss Carter," he said, gesturing to a seat across from him. "I've heard quite the story about your situation." I sat, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I'm sure you have, and I'm here to set the record straight." He folded his hands. "Go ahead." I took a deep breath. I worked for years to earn this position. I never declined the job. My mother, Evelyn Carter, made that decision without my knowledge and submitted false information to replace me with my sister, Vanessa, who, as you're probably aware, lacks the necessary qualifications. Blackwell leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes assessing me. "And why would she do that?" I exhaled slowly. "Because she's always seen me as the lesser daughter, the one who had to prove her worth while Vanessa was handed everything. This job was my victory, and she couldn't stand it." Silence stretched between us. Then Blackwell spoke. "Your credentials and performance in the interview process were exceptional. In fact, you were our top candidate." I straightened. "Then give me the job I earned." He glanced at Langley, who nodded. Blackwell turned back to me. "I will investigate this matter fully, but as of now, you are reinstated. However, I need to understand the extent of your mother's interference." I clenched my fists under the table. "I can provide evidence. I have emails and texts that prove she's manipulated my career before." Blackwell sighed. "I will also need to have a conversation with your mother and sister." I tensed. "They'll lie. Then we'll see how their story holds up under scrutiny," he said simply. Relief and anger warred within me. I had won a battle, but the war wasn't over. As I walked out of that office, I knew one thing for certain. Evelyn Carter had underestimated me, and she was about to learn exactly how big of a mistake that was. I left Kensington and Moore's office with my head held high, but inside, my emotions were a storm. Relief, anger, determination, they all swirled together, making it hard to think straight. I had won this round, but my mother and Vanessa wouldn't just back down. I knew them too well. As soon as I got home, I sent Lily off to play in her room and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed. "Jessica." I answered on the second ring. "Hey." Jessica's voice was sharp. "Tell me everything." "What happened?" I exhaled, rubbing my temple. I confronted HR. They believed me. Blackwell reinstated me, but now he wants to have a conversation with my mother and Vanessa. Jessica let out a low whistle. "Oh, this is going to be good. You think they'll admit what they did?" I scoffed. "Not a chance. They'll lie. They'll twist things. But Blackwell isn't an idiot." Jessica was quiet for a moment. "You okay?" I sighed. "I don't know. I won this battle, but I feel like there's another one coming. They won't let this go." Jessica hesitated. "Maybe it's time to cut them off for good." Her words settled deep in my chest. Was I ready for that? Completely walking away from my mother, from my only sister? "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Well," Jessica said, "whatever happens, I'm here." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about what was coming. Tomorrow, my mother and Vanessa would face Blackwell. I knew how they operated: manipulation, half-truths, playing the victim. I needed to be ready. Morning came too soon. I dropped Lily off at school and made my way back to Kensington and Moore. The tension in my body tightened as I walked into the office. Langley met me in the lobby. "They're already inside," he murmured. I nodded. "Time to finish this." Inside the executive conference room, my mother sat at the far end of the table, her usual composed expression firmly in place. Vanessa sat beside her, arms crossed, looking irritated. Blackwell sat across from them, his hands folded. I took my seat, meeting my mother's gaze head-on. Blackwell spoke first. "Evelyn, Vanessa, thank you for coming. There's a serious matter we need to address." Evelyn smiled smoothly. "Of course, Robert. I'm happy to clear up any confusion." Blackwell's expression remained unreadable. "It's more than confusion. We have reason to believe that false information was provided to this company regarding Amelia's employment status and Vanessa's qualifications." My mother feigned surprise. "False information? I was only looking out for Amelia. I assumed she had decided against the position and wanted to ensure the company wasn't left in a difficult position." I clenched my jaw. "You didn't assume anything. You made a decision for me, without my knowledge. You stole my job." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, it's just a job. You're acting like this is life or death." I turned to Blackwell. Do you see what I mean? Blackwell's gaze sharpened. Vanessa, you do realize that misrepresenting qualifications in a professional setting is serious, correct? Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. It's not like I faked a degree or something. I would have learned everything on the job. Langley, who had been silent, finally spoke. You didn't even make it through your first week. Vanessa's face darkened. That's not my fault. The training was bad. Blackwell leaned forward. You humiliated this company in front of major clients, and that's putting it mildly. A flicker of panic crossed Vanessa's face. I just needed more time. Blackwell turned back to my mother. Evelyn, you personally vouched for Vanessa. You told me she had Amelia's experience. For the first time, my mother faltered. I may have exaggerated slightly, but I only wanted to help both my daughters. I let out a bitter laugh. No, you wanted to help Vanessa. You never wanted me to succeed. Evelyn straightened. That's not true. Blackwell's voice was sharp. Regardless of your intentions, what you did was unethical. If Amelia hadn't stepped forward, Vanessa would still be here, struggling to do a job she wasn't qualified for, damaging this company's reputation. Silence fell over the room. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Vanessa glared at the table. Blackwell exhaled. Here's what's going to happen. Vanessa's employment here is terminated immediately. Evelyn, this situation has left your credibility in serious question among my colleagues and other business leaders. I suggest you think carefully about how you proceed in your career. From this point forward, Vanessa shot up from her chair. Are you serious? This is Amelia's fault. She's always playing the victim. I stood. I'm not the victim. I'm the one who fought for what was mine. You tried to steal it. And you failed. Vanessa's nostrils flared. I hope you choke on this job. Evelyn reached for her. Vanessa. But she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. My mother let out a heavy sigh, then turned to me. Amelia, I only ever wanted what was best for you. I stared at her, barely able to comprehend the words. You don't get to say that anymore. Her face hardened, but she didn't argue. She knew, deep down, she had lost. Blackwell stood. That will be all. I nodded to him, then walked out without another word. I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp air. It was over. For the first time in my life, I had won against them. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. Jessica, I answered. It's done. And Vanessa's fired. Mom's reputation is in the gutter. Blackwell made sure they both understood exactly what they did. Jessica let out a victorious laugh. Damn right. How do you feel? I thought about it. I should have felt relief, satisfaction, but mostly, I felt exhausted. Tired, I admitted, but free. Jessica was quiet for a moment. Good. Now go home and celebrate with Lily. I smiled. Yeah, I think I will. That night, I sat with Lily on the couch, watching one of her favorite movies. She snuggled against me, her little body warm and safe. Mom? She asked sleepily. Yeah, baby? You won, right? I kissed her forehead. Yeah, I did. Lily yawned. Good. You deserved it. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. The following days passed in a blur. The weight of years of manipulation had been lifted, but my body hadn't quite caught up to the reality of it. I still half expected a phone call from my mother, a sneering remark from Vanessa, some last-minute scheme to undo what had been set in motion. But the silence stretched on. I returned to work at Kensington and Moore, stepping into my rightful position. There was no hesitation, no sense of imposter syndrome, just the steady certainty that I belonged there. Blackwell kept his word, treating me with the same professionalism he always had. If he held any lingering doubts about my family's actions, he never let them show. Jessica stopped by my apartment that weekend, a bottle of wine in hand. So, she said, settling onto my couch. No sudden sabotage attempts? I snorted. Not yet. Jessica handed me a glass. Here's to finally cutting the strings. I clinked mine against hers. To new beginnings. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly in control of my life. I had fought for my career, stood up for myself, and refused to let my mother define me any longer. But just as I was beginning to relax into my newfound peace, the past came knocking, literally. It was a quiet Sunday evening. I had just finished making dinner when there was a sharp knock at the door. Lily looked up from the table, her fork halfway to her mouth. Mom. I set my napkin down, my stomach tightening. Stay here, sweetheart. When I opened the door, I wasn't surprised to see my mother standing there, her polished appearance just slightly frayed at the edges. Her hair was perfectly styled, her coat expensive, but there was something off about her expression. I leaned against the doorframe. "What do you want, Mom?" She sighed, pressing her lips together. "May I come in?" I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to shut the door, but I also knew that if I didn't hear her out now, she'd just find another way to insert herself back into my life. I stepped aside. "Make it quick." She walked in, looking around as if expecting judgment. The apartment was warm, lived in, nothing like the cold, pristine home I had grown up in. She turned to face me, clasping her hands. "Amelia, I know I made mistakes." I raised an eyebrow. "That's an understatement." She exhaled sharply. "I didn't come here to argue. Then why are you here?" Her gaze flickered toward the hallway, where Lily sat in the dining room, trying to pretend she wasn't listening. "I wanted to see my granddaughter." I crossed my arms. "You never cared before." "That's not true," I scoffed. "You barely looked at her. You made it clear how you felt about me being a single mother." She flinched. I was wrong. I waited, arms still folded. She glanced at the floor. "I lost everything, Amelia." There it was, the real reason she was here. "My reputation is ruined," she continued, voice quieter. "I was forced to resign from several boards. Vanessa, well, you know Vanessa. She blames me for everything." I stared at her, unmoved. "That's between you and her." She looked up, eyes searching mine. "I want to make things right." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "You don't get to say that after a lifetime of tearing me down." She stepped closer. "I'm still your mother." I met her gaze, unflinching. "And I'm still your daughter. But that never stopped you from treating me like I was less than, from trying to control me." Silence stretched between us. "I want to be part of your life," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "Part of Lily's." Lily's voice broke through the tension. "Mom?" I turned. She was standing at the edge of the hallway, watching us carefully. I sighed and crouched to her level. "Go finish your dinner, sweetheart. This is adult stuff." She hesitated, looking between me and my mother. Then, with the sharp intuition only children seem to have, she nodded and walked away. I straightened. "Mom, I don't know if I can forgive you." She swallowed. "I don't expect immediate forgiveness." I studied her. For the first time in my life, she looked human. Not the cold, calculating woman I had always known, but someone who had finally, truly faced consequences. That didn't mean I was ready to let her back in. I sighed. "I'll think about it." Her eyes lit up with something dangerously close to hope. "That's all I ask." I opened the door. "Good night, Mom." She hesitated, then stepped out. "Good night, Amelia." I closed the door and pressed my back against it, exhaling slowly. Jessica was right. Cutting the strings had been necessary. But closure? That was something I still had to figure out. That night, I sat with Lily on the couch, her small body curled against mine. She traced patterns on my arm absent-mindedly. "Mom? Yeah, baby? Do you think Grandma really wants to change?" I sighed, tucking a curl behind her ear. "I don't know, but change takes time. And trust? That takes even longer." She was quiet for a moment. "I don't want her to hurt you again." I hugged her tight. "Me neither." Lily snuggled into me. "I love you, Mom." I pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you more." As she drifted off to sleep, I stared at the ceiling, my mind turning over everything that had happened. My mother's downfall, Vanessa's betrayal, my fight to reclaim my career. I had won. But winning didn't erase the scars, and maybe that was okay. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for their approval. I wasn't trying to prove my worth. I was living for me. And that was enough. The following week felt like the first breath of fresh air after years of suffocation. There was no more looking over my shoulder, waiting for my mother's interference. No more dealing with Vanessa's smug comments. My job was mine. My future was mine. I buried myself in work at Kensington and more, proving to myself and everyone else that I was exactly where I belonged. My team respected me. My projects were moving forward, and Blackwell had even assigned me to a high-profile account. It felt good. No, it felt right. Jessica called one evening while I was making dinner. "All right, superstar," she said. "Tell me how the new job is treating you." I smiled, stirring the pot of pasta. "Honestly, better than I imagined. It's busy, but I love it. I knew you'd kill it." She paused. And Any more unexpected visits from the Wicked Witch? I sighed, knowing exactly who she meant. No, not a word. Jessica made a noise. Do you think she finally got the message? I thought about it. My mother wasn't the type to fade into the background, but maybe, just maybe, she'd finally realized she had pushed too far. I don't know, I admitted, and I don't care. I'm moving forward. She can either accept it or stay out of my way. Jessica let out a dramatic gasp. Who is this woman, and what has she done with my best friend? I laughed. She finally learned to put herself first. Lily peeked into the kitchen. Mom, is dinner almost ready? I ruffled her hair. Almost, sweetheart. Jessica overheard. All right, I'll let you go. But let's do brunch this weekend. You deserve some fun. I smiled. Deal. After hanging up, I turned back to Lily. You excited for your art fair tomorrow? Her face lit up. Yes! I hope people like my painting. They will love it. I crouched beside her. And even if they don't, I love it. And I love you. She threw her arms around my neck. I love you too, Mom. The next day, work passed in a blur. Meetings, financial reports, reviewing market trends, it all felt like second nature now. During my lunch break, I took a moment to check my emails, and then I saw it. A message from my mother. My stomach clenched. For a second, I considered deleting it without opening it. But something made me pause. I clicked it. Amelia, I know I've hurt you. I know I've done things that are hard to forgive. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to tell you that I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. Losing my reputation, losing Vanessa's trust, and worst of all, losing you, it's forced me to reflect on my choices. I don't expect you to believe I've changed overnight. I miss you. And I miss Lily. I wish I had been a better mother. I wish I had seen you for who you are earlier. I hope, in time, we can speak again. But if not, I understand. With love, Mom, I stared at the screen. My emotions tangled in a way I couldn't immediately untangle. She sounded sincere. But sincerity didn't erase years of manipulation. I closed my laptop and pushed the thought away. Some wounds didn't heal just because an apology arrived. That evening, Lily's art fair was in full swing. Parents and children moved between easels, admiring paintings, sculptures, and projects. The smell of glue and paint filled the air. Lily led me to her painting, a bright, colorful scene of two people standing beneath a big oak tree, their hands clasped. I tilted my head. Tell me about it, sweetheart. She grinned. It's me and you, Mom. The tree is strong, like us, and the roots go deep, just like how we take care of each other. My heart clenched. I blinked back tears. It's perfect, she beamed, looking around. Do you think Grandma would like it? The question caught me off guard. I hesitated. Maybe, she sighed. I don't know if I want to see her again, but I kind of miss her. I crouched to her level, brushing a curl from her face. It's okay to feel both things, baby. Missing someone doesn't mean you have to let them back in. Lily nodded slowly, taking that in. Yeah. As we admired the rest of the art fair, I let the moment sit in my chest. My mother's email, Lily's question. They both stirred something I wasn't sure how to process yet. Days passed. I didn't respond to my mother's email. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. But I was moving forward. Work was thriving. My relationship with Lily was stronger than ever. For once, my life wasn't controlled by guilt or obligation. One afternoon, Blackwell called me into his office. Amelia, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I have an opportunity for you. I raised an eyebrow. Opportunity? He leaned back in his chair. You've exceeded our expectations. There's an upcoming expansion project in our firm, a leadership position in financial strategy. I straightened. You want me to lead it? He smiled. You've earned it. I inhaled deeply, my chest swelling with pride. I accept. As I walked out of his office, I knew this was just the beginning. For the first time, I was building my own future, not for my mother, not in competition with Vanessa, just for me. A year had passed since I reclaimed my life. A year since I walked away from my mother's control, since I took back what was mine. In that time, I had grown more than I ever thought possible. My role at Kensington and Moore had expanded beyond what I had imagined. The leadership position Blackwell had offered wasn't just another step, it was a leap forward. I had a team of analysts reporting to me, and I was leading major financial projects that put our firm in the spotlight. I had earned the respect of my peers, and I had proven beyond any doubt that I deserved to be there. But more importantly, I had found peace. Lily was thriving. Her confidence had blossomed, her love for art growing stronger every day. We had moved into a bigger apartment with a beautiful view of the city. It wasn't about status or proving anything to anyone. It was about giving us both the life we deserved. And yet, there were still pieces of the past that lingered. One afternoon, I was finishing up reports in my office when my phone buzzed. Jessica. Hey, I answered, leaning back in my chair. Guess who I just saw? I smirked. If it's a celebrity, I expect pictures. Jessica sighed. I wish. No, it was Vanessa. The first stiffened. Where? At some networking event downtown. She was trying to schmooze people, but you could tell no one was taking her seriously. I exhaled. She's still trying to fake her way through life? Pretty much. Jessica hesitated. She looked rough, Amelia. Like, really rough. I don't think things have been going well for her. I didn't know how to respond to that. There was no satisfaction in hearing about Vanessa's downfall. It just felt hollow. Jessica sighed. Anyway, just thought you should know. Figured you'd rather hear it from me. Thanks, Jess. After we hung up, I sat there, staring out my office window. Vanessa had never apologized, never reached out after everything fell apart. Maybe she never would, and maybe that was for the best. Some people never changed. That weekend, Lily and I spent the afternoon at a park near our apartment. The air was crisp, the leaves turning shades of gold and orange. She ran ahead, her laughter ringing through the open space. As I watched her, my phone vibrated in my pocket, a number I hadn't seen in a long time. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A pause. Then my mother's voice. Amelia. I closed my eyes, exhaling through my nose. Mom, I wasn't sure if you'd answer. Neither was I. Another pause. How have you been? I glanced at Lily, who was chasing after a butterfly, completely unaware of the moment unfolding. I've been good. That's good. She sounded different. Not the cold, calculating woman I had grown up with. Not the sharp, dismissive mother who had always made me feel small. There was something else in her voice. Something I had never heard before. Hesitation. I saw your name in an article the other day, she continued, about the Kensington and Moore expansion. They said you led the project. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I did. A soft breath. I'm proud of you, Amelia. The words caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say to them. I had spent my whole life waiting to hear them, but now that they were here, they felt too late. I never told you that enough, she admitted. I should have. I should have done a lot of things differently. I swallowed, my chest tight. Yeah, you should have. Silence stretched between us. Then, she said, I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to say that. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. Okay, she hesitated again. Tell Lily. I say hello. I'll think about it. She didn't argue. Take care, Amelia. You too. I hung up, staring at the phone in my hand. Maybe she had changed. Maybe she hadn't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility to figure out. I turned back to Lily, who was waving me over excitedly. Mom, come see this. I smiled and walked toward her, slipping my phone into my pocket. The past would always be there, but it didn't define me anymore. I had built something stronger than the life I had left behind. I had built us, and that was enough. Story 2. In Maple Creek, New England, a tiny artsy town known for its historic structures and artist community. In the early light, Caroline Bradshaw was making coffee in the kitchen of her one apartment. She could see the Victorian building in the middle of town through the window, the top level of which had the golden sign of Bradshaw Gallery shining in the early light. For a little while, Caroline stared at the location that was once her family's pride, but is now a faraway thing. Look, Mom, I got it done. Noah, Caroline's 5-year-old son, interrupted her thoughts with a lively voice. A sketch paper with a kitten, created in remarkably fine strokes, was in his tiny hands. It was a picture with extraordinary expressiveness that portrayed even the feelings behind the cat's eyes, not simply a child's scrawl. Noah, that's fantastic. Caroline stroked her son's dark locks with a kind grin. This cat appears to be very alive. That one from the park is the identical one. It had a mournful expression in its eyes. Oh, he said. Caroline saw herself in her son's comments and marveled at his ability to observe. She was also able to see the feelings hidden behind the surface. She was now using that gift in her work as a children's art instructor at the community arts center in her area. Landscapes and abstract artworks covered the walls of her small but tidy apartment. Caroline had made it. Additionally, her art was slowly becoming more well-known as it was shown in tiny neighborhood cafes and restaurants. This was far from the success her parents had previously anticipated from her, though. Caroline put cereal and a banana in front of Noah and said, "Now, after breakfast, we're going to my class today. Today, we have a very special visitor. Louis, a well-known potter in the community." Cheers. Noah had a gleam in his eyes. "Can I use clay to create something?" "Of course," Caroline said. "You are free to use your creativity." Imagination. Her parents, Richard and Eleanor Bradshaw, had always attempted to ignore it in favor of common sense. They operated the town's oldest and most esteemed art gallery. However, art was only a commodity, an investment, and a status symbol to them. Richard, who was renowned for his calm judgment and firm decisiveness, carried the pride of a prestigious family that had been around for decades. One of the main players in the town's charity endeavors was Eleanor. On the outside, she seemed kind and welcoming, but below her graceful exterior, she had a strong will and high moral standards. Victoria, Caroline's sister, was always the ideal daughter. After earning an MBA and graduating with honors from an Ivy League institution, she went back to work as her father's right-hand man in the family company. She lived up to her parents' expectations and gained reputation as a young local businesswoman. Caroline looked out the window every now and again while she got ready for the morning. It was Friday today. This weekend, the gallery will be hosting a unique show. She used to participate in these kinds of preparations, particularly in high school. She won many local young artist contests when her professors noticed her creative aptitude. However, her parents considered her gift a pastime and anticipated that she would eventually pursue a career in business. You can't survive only on your artistic skill. As a Bradshaw daughter, Eleanor, her mother, frequently advised her to choose a more pragmatic route. Caroline recalled herself at the age of 17 as she buttoned her son's uniform. The day she met him, the time she painted by herself in the art room till late at night. A senior in the art club who likewise battled to balance his personal enthusiasm with his family's expectations. They finally fell in love after becoming confidants. However, that romance ended in a mistake one night, and her life was never the same. She was just 17 when the pregnancy test came back positive. Finding the guts to inform her parents took weeks, but the outcome was much more violent than she had expected. "Mom, come on." Her thoughts were disturbed by Noah's words. He was waiting by the door, already wearing his backpack. Indeed, come on. Before leaving the apartment, Caroline forced a smile and pushed aside the recollections of the past. She looked at herself in the little mirror at the door. Curly brown hair, greenish-blue eyes, and a look of mild exhaustion. She straightened her shoulders and inhaled deeply. She didn't have time to regret the past now. Only for Noah's future could she proceed. Her cell phone rang when she was driving to the art center. She noticed a name on the screen that hadn't rang in 5 years. Victoria? Caroline's chest constricted as she gazed at the phone. After 5 years, get in touch. What had taken place? She hesitated for a second and said, "Caroline? It's me. I would want to speak with you." There was a hint of tension in her sister's voice. Caroline took a deep breath. "Has anything taken place? I would like to speak with you face to face. Please." Caroline didn't say anything for a while. Holding her hand, Noah peered up with interest. "Okay," she said at last. "When? If you're okay with it, tomorrow." Caroline looked toward the heart of town. The Bradshaw Gallery's flag was flapping in the wind on this Friday morning. "Okay." Caroline hung up and let out a long sigh. With a single phone call, she felt the new life she had created over the previous 5 years start to falter. She tightened her hold on Noah's hand and started to go forward. Caroline had shut herself in a school restroom stall when she was 17 years old, her hands shaking as she stared at the pregnancy test. Clearly, 2 lines emerged. The third test had the same outcome. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. She came home later than usual after school. As Caroline walked through the gate, the Bradshaw home stood proudly in the dusk light. As she walked into the entry hall, she could hear her heartbeat in her ears. From somewhere came the voice of her mother, Eleanor. "You're quite late, Caroline." Her sister, Victoria, and her parents were in the living room. Her mother was going over some committee paperwork, while her father, Richard, was reading a newspaper. Victoria was working on her college projects with her laptop open. It resembled a picture of the ideal family photo. "I apologize. In the art room, I was completing a project." Caroline said a falsehood. In fact, she had spent hours sitting by herself on a bench in a park close to the school. Her mother remarked, "I kept dinner warm for you. First, wash your hands." Caroline clenched her fists and placed her bag on the ground. With a smaller voice than she had intended, she said, "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" Without raising her eyes from her papers, her mother answered, "It's crucial." At last, her tone caused both parents to look up. Victoria averted her gaze from her laptop as well, curious. "What is it?" Her father put down his newspaper and asked, "Regarding your grades." Caroline's throat became parched. "No, I." Eleanor's and Richard's faces tightened as they noticed their daughter's unusual tension. "I'm expecting a child." The air in the room froze at that moment. Caroline gazed at her parents' faces, seeing them shift from astonishment to incredulity, and finally to rage. "What were you saying?" Richard's voice was low and dangerously quiet. "I'm expecting a child. I think I'm in my 3rd month." Caroline continued with a trembling voice with David. "That poor boy from the art club." Eleanor's face twisted. Caroline tried to object, but her father's explosion of anger drowned it out. "You are not my daughter." Richard stood up and shouted. His words boomed against the walls of the mansion. "To bring such dishonor to us, to dirty the Bradshaw name. Dad, please listen." Caroline appealed through tears. "Get out," this time Eleanor shouted. "You've wounded our honor. Do you aim to make us the laughing stock of the town?" Caroline gazed at Victoria. Her 14-year-old sister was startled, with an expression of dread and perplexity. But she said nothing. "I want to have this baby." Caroline placed both hands on her abdomen. "David, also David," Richard scoffed. "Do you believe the dropout will accept accountability? His family is one of the town's poorest. Can they do anything?" "He is an accomplished painter," Caroline objected. "His skill is recognized by the instructors. He was able to. That dude is enough." Eleanor cut her off. "You'll take care of it right away. I'll call a physician." "No." Caroline let out a cry. "I'd like to have this child." Richard became furious and his cheeks flushed. "Now go out. This is a house you can never go back to." His tone was icy, as if he had made up his mind. "Please, Dad. Right now." Richard struck the table with a rap. "I will no longer acknowledge you as a member of the Bradshaw family if you decide to choose such shame." Eleanor rose and gestured toward the staircase. "Leave with only what you really need. For the next half hour, you will be responsible for the results of your choice." Caroline sobbed in her room while packing as many possessions and clothes as she could fit in a bag. Victoria stepped timidly inside the open door. "Sister." Her voice trembled as she said, "Vicky." "It's all right." Caroline gave her sister a tearful grin. "There is nothing wrong with you." "But where are you going?" "I'm not sure." Caroline gave an honest response. "But I'll be all right. I'll find a way. Take this cash." As she gave her sister several $100s from her piggy bank, Victoria whispered, "Thank you." Caroline gave her sister a hug. "I cherish you. Remember that." Her parents gave her icy stares and no words of farewell when she came down the stairs. Caroline left the Bradshaw home through the front door. She started to tremble as the cold of the night took hold of her, and she started to stroll down the street. She called David that night, but his reaction was quite different from what she had anticipated. He called Caroline and said, "I can't do this. I was given a scholarship by my father. Next month I can attend an art school in New York. I can't sacrifice everything for a kid. But you claim to love me." Caroline was shaky as she spoke. "I apologize." He sounded more relieved than sorry. "I genuinely like you. But you know I'm not ready to be a father." Caroline sobbed in the phone booth, holding her knees as soon as the conversation was over. In the morning, she went to high school after spending the entire night around the town. Weary. No lover, no home. All she had was her kid and a little cash. Caroline. In front of the art room of the school, she was startled when Miss Grace Anderson called out to her, "Why are you here at such an early hour? Are you okay?" Caroline's face was chilly and pallid from exhaustion as she gazed up at her teacher. She simply broke down in sobs, unable to speak. With a kind murmur, Miss Grace gave her a hug. "What took place? What's the matter?" Caroline also told her everything. Her parents are venting their rage, David's treachery. Miss Grace stroked her shoulder and listened in silence. With decisiveness, the teacher stated, "Come to my house. You're not by yourself. I'll assist you." Caroline gave an indescribable nod of appreciation. She was still 17 years old, pregnant, lost, and deserted by her family. But, for the sake of her child and her own independence in the future, she found a glimmer of hope in that moment. She needed to be strong. Noah, we're nearly finished. As Caroline cleared away the strewn art supplies on the floor of the art studio, she called out to her son, who was still drawing intently by the window. His brown curls were dyed golden by the twilight light, and shadows moved across the drawing paper with every motion of his tiny hands. After 5 years, Caroline's life had changed in a way she never would have predicted thanks to Miss Grace. After graduating from high school, she attended a nearby community college and obtained a qualification in art education. She now taught kids to paint at the town's art studio. Despite not being opulent, her steady income was sufficient to support her and Noah. "Look, Mom," Noah proudly displayed his illustration. "I'm playing in the park with you." When Caroline saw her son's work, she gasped. For a child, the color scheme and composition were amazing. Above all, he was able to capture an incredible emotional expression. In an autumn park, two figures, clearly her and Noah, were shown strolling hand in hand. The two people's expressions were filled with a soft joy, the changing season, and the lovely colors of the trees in the background. "Noah, this is fantastic." Caroline gave her son a hug. "You are incredibly talented." Noah grinned broadly at his mother's compliment. "So did my teacher." "I have a special talent," she said. Caroline grinned. However, she experienced complex emotions on the inside. Unquestionably, she and David both contributed to Noah's talent. She had never attempted to find David since that day. According to rumors, he was successful in the commercial art industry after graduating from New York's art school. However, Caroline had no idea whether he even knew he had a son. "What are we having for dinner tonight, Mom?" Her thoughts were interrupted by Noah's question. "Since it's a special day, that is," Caroline grinned. "What about pizza?" "Cheers!" Noah jumped for joy with lots of cheese. Of course, as they locked the studio and began walking through the twilight town, Caroline felt a bit nervous after the phone call with Victoria. She hadn't slept all night. The next morning, she sent a reply message to her sister. "Let's meet at the Central Park Cafe at 3 p.m. tomorrow." Tomorrow? The day she would meet a family member after 5 years. Her heart was heavy, swirling with complex emotions. Back at the apartment, they enjoyed their delivered pizza, talking about the day's events as usual. Noah enthusiastically told about adventures with his classmates, praise from his teacher, and oddly shaped clouds he saw in the park, while Caroline's heart warmed at her son's innocent joy. The thought of tomorrow's meeting wouldn't leave her mind. After Noah fell asleep, Caroline sat at the small desk in the living room and opened an old scrapbook. It contained high school memories, newspaper articles from when she won art contests, and the last photo with her parents. She touched the photo, feeling its coldness. The next afternoon, Caroline dropped Noah off at the studio's children's program earlier than usual and headed to Central Park alone, sitting at a cafe terrace table, nervously stirring her coffee. A familiar figure entered her view. Caroline Victoria looked more mature and refined than 5 years ago. Dressed in a perfect suit, she exuded the Bradshaw family's dignity, but her expression showed anxiety and tension. "Vicky." Caroline stood up, unsure how to react. Should she hug her or keep the greeting formal? Victoria moved first, lightly embracing her sister. "It's been a while. You look well." "Indeed. More or less." Caroline returned to her seat and invited her sister to join. "You've really grown up too." For a while, the two spent time on superficial topics like the weather and changes in town. Eventually, Victoria took a deep breath and got to the point. "I'm getting married next month." "Congratulations," Caroline said sincerely. "Who's the lucky man?" "James Harrington. He's the son of one of Dad's friends." Victoria smiled a bit shyly. "We first met through our parents, but he's really a wonderful person." Seeing her sister's happy face, Caroline felt relief rather than envy. "That's wonderful, Caroline." Victoria's expression turned serious. "I want you to come to the wedding." Caroline put down her coffee cup, unable to hide her surprise. "Me? But your parents. Our parents want to reconcile," Victoria said, "especially because Dad suddenly went unwell." "Richard." Caroline thought it weird to utter her father's name. For 5 years, she had tried not to think about her parents. Indeed, his heart hasn't been healthy since last year, Victoria stated worriedly. The doctors suggest he should lessen his job and stress, but Dad is as adamant as ever. Caroline was rocked with conflicting feelings, wrath and resentment for the father who had earlier rejected her, and at the same time, somewhere deep inside, concern due to their blood tie. Also, James's family is widely known throughout town, Victoria continued unwillingly. They expect a wedding with the entire family present. So you're phoning me to keep up appearances? Caroline's voice showed a tiny bitterness. No, Victoria swiftly opposed. I want it. My sister is you. Without you, I don't want to have my greatest day. Caroline glanced out the window. Children were playing in the park, dogs running and couples strolling through typical daily settings. The new life she and her son had created. How about Noah? She inquired. Victoria paused a little. Naturally, you're welcome to. I want to get to know my nephew, Caroline thought. What impact on Noah would it make to bring her parents back into her life? She had always given him evasive answers when he inquired about his grandparents. They're far away. Give it some thought, Caroline remarked at last. Making a choice is difficult. Of course, Victoria was understanding, but I would like you to inform me as quickly as possible. Victoria gave Caroline an envelope as they were leaving. The wedding invitation, along with another item. I was requested to offer you by our parents. Feeling the weight of the second packet, Caroline accepted it. What is this? I'm not sure. Victoria gave an honest response. They just requested that I deliver it to you immediately. After Noah had gone to sleep, we returned to the flat. Caroline opened the second envelope slowly. There was a brief note and a check inside. This belongs to the trust fund, Caroline. You ought to have gotten it. If you want, we can talk about the rest. Bradshaw, Richard. When she saw the check's amount, she gasped. It exceeded the amount she would make in a year. Caroline lay up that night, contemplating. She made her choice the next morning. Maybe, for the benefit of both her and Noah, it was time to mend the scars from the past. Then she messaged Victoria, I'll attend the nuptials. 3 days from now, on Saturday afternoon, I will bring Noah. Caroline opened her flat and heard the doorbell ring. 5 years later, her parents were standing there. Richard's gray hair made him appear older than previously. The creases around Eleanor's eyes had deepened, although she was still dressed tastefully. The power in Caroline Richards' voice had diminished. Come in, please. They were invited by Caroline. Calm yet anxious, they walked into the living room. With art tools all about him, Noah was seated on the couch, drawing. Curiosity prompted him to glance up at the strangers. These are, Noah. After a moment of hesitation, Caroline went on. Your granny and granddad. Richard and Eleanor froze the instant they saw Noah. After it had rained, Noah was sketching a woodland scene with sunshine filtering through the trees. A 5-year-old could not have imagined the degree of completeness in its technique and color sense. What is it? What is this? Richard was shaky as he spoke. He walked gently over to take the drawing from Noah. Gazing at the photo over her husband's shoulder, Eleanor likewise let out a gasp. Their looks combine astonishment with familiarity, or maybe anguish from a past experience. Richard was at a loss for words as he looked at Caroline. Your tie is crooked, Noah, Caroline said while adjusting her son's little tuxedo. Do you feel anxious? Noah shook his head, but there was worry in his big blue eyes. Will there be a large number of grandparents? Indeed, Caroline grinned. However, there is nothing to fear. Everyone is excited to meet you, I'm sure. Caroline gasped when she entered the Harrington Plaza Hotel's huge ballroom. The opulent room was packed with the town's nobles, crystal chandeliers, and an altar with fresh flowers. She felt as though she was returning to her own environment for the first time since leaving the Bradshaw house. Caroline Victoria hurried over wearing her bridal gown, which was all white. You arrived. She gave her sister a firm embrace before turning to face Noah. You're Noah then? It's good to meet you. My name is Victoria. Despite his shyness, Noah gave her a courteous greeting. Best wishes for your wedding. You look stunning in your dress. Victoria gave a happy laugh. Thank you. You appear really attractive, too. Eleanor and Richard came around the corner of the room. They had kept in touch with Caroline since their reunion at the apartment a few days prior, beginning the process of repairing their relationship. Nevertheless, there was a lot of tension at the public meeting. I'm glad you came, Caroline. Richard gave his daughter a quick kiss. Eleanor greeted her in the same manner, smiling softly at Noah. Caroline remarked, "It's a beautiful ceremony, fitting Victoria." Caroline and Noah watched the wedding in silence as it went forward gravely. Noah, who appeared to be a little disinterested in the lengthy ceremonial occasion, pulled out his notebook and started doodling quietly in a couch corner as the reception got underway. "This is a wonderful!" exclamation shortly after was heard coming from the direction of the sofa. Caroline turned to find Noah's sketchbook being examined by Joseph Harrington, James's uncle and a well-known art critic. "It is uncommon to witness such brilliance. Whose child is this?" Joseph yelled at everyone nearby. Caroline rushed over to join Noah. "You and he are my sons." Joseph gave Caroline a questioning glance. "Caroline, Bradshaw." Joseph's gaze brightened. "The oldest daughter of Eleanor and Richard." Caroline gave a tense nod. She felt uneasy as people started to congregate around her and she found herself the focus of attention. Joseph expressed with joy that the creative genius of the Bradshaw family had been handed on. "It makes me think of Richard's early creations, father's creations." Caroline was perplexed. Joseph gave a startled look in response. "Indeed, naturally. In the past, Richard Bradshaw was a talented painter. His striking use of color attracted attention to his dramatic landscape paintings. The art world suffered a major loss when he decided to give up painting in order to take over the gallery. The vibe in the venue altered at that same moment. A lot of people looked at Eleanor and Richard, who were standing uneasily. "I had no idea," Caroline muttered. Joseph was perplexed. "I assumed you were aware, particularly because you yourself possess the creative skill." The discussion of your family's talent was eagerly listened to by the invited visitors. A female inquired. "Indeed." Caroline gave a tentative response. "I am an art educator. I teach kids how to paint in a nearby art studio. Is that correct?" Joseph's brows went up. "You yourself appear to possess a great deal of skill. At the Bradshaw Gallery, though, why not? That's sufficient." "Joseph." Richard came over and spoke sternly. "No, I'd want to know." Caroline looked over at her dad. "You painted. So why did you reject my ability?" There was silence in the room. Richard is the center of attention. With a heavy sigh, he turned to face his wife. Eleanor's expression was one of humiliation and terror. Richard stammered as he spoke. "I used to be passionate, but I've since realized that art alone cannot sustain one in the actual world. So you wanted me to follow in your footsteps?" Caroline's tone conveyed sorrow instead of rage. "Richard, Eleanor." Joseph spoke those words. "Why would you give such amazing skill to your daughter and grandson? Family matters are private." Eleanor grabbed Richard's arm and cut him off. However, it was too late. Among the visitors, whispers started to circulate. 5 years ago, the oldest daughter of the Bradshaws vanished. "It's that kid. There was a controversy, I heard." With the intention of leaving the arena, Caroline took Noah's hand. Her sister's special day was too important to her to spoil. However, Victoria got in her way. "Don't leave." Victoria took her sister's hand in hers. She spoke loudly while wearing her bridal gown and standing in the middle of the room. "I'm getting married today. The fact that my family is back together is what matters most to me." She went on to embrace Caroline and Noah. "The fact that my sister and nephew are back with us makes me very pleased." The venue exploded in applause. Warm looks were also exchanged by the Harrington family and Victoria's new husband. James stood behind his wife, putting her hand on her shoulder. Aware of people's looks, Caroline Richard walked up to his daughter and said, "We were wrong for our attitude that day. I'm sorry." Eleanor stood next to her husband, staring at Noah as well. "Please pardon us. We're looking for a fresh start." "A simple apology isn't enough," Caroline stated quietly as she carefully looked at her parents. "Show Noah that you genuinely care about him by reflecting on and acting upon it. He has the right to make his own choices, and I respect those choices," she added, resting a hand on her son's shoulder. "Maybe we may progressively mend our friendship, if you can comprehend that." Eleanor and Richard nodded, embracing the humiliation in front of the world. Snow was silently building up in Maple Creek streets on Christmas morning. Caroline's flat window offered a postcard-like vista. "Mom, get up!" Santa arrived. Caroline was awakened by Noah's eager voice. After 6 months of Victoria's wedding, Caroline and Noah's life had steadily changed. There were more gifts than ever before under the little tree in the living room, including several from Eleanor and Richard. "Is Grandpa on his way?" With bright eyes, Noah inquired. "Yes, Caroline said at 10 o'clock. The rejection was gone from her voice. It did once. Trust, even though it wasn't finished yet. Richard had fulfilled his vow and started to rediscover his love of painting after the wedding. He periodically showed Noah how to paint after opening his long-sealed workshop. Additionally, Eleanor kept up her relationship building with her grandson. At the same time, the Bradshaw Gallery was slowly evolving, setting aside time every Saturday to spend in the park together. Richard established a program to find and encourage up and coming local artists, and gave a part of the gallery the moniker New Generation. There were exhibits of Caroline's pupils' work, and she also occasionally hosted seminars. When the doorbell rang, Caroline opened it to see something she had never seen before. Eleanor and Richard were standing there with big gifts. "Happy Christmas," Richard remarked. Instead of the icy dignity of the past, there was just one spark in his eyes. They were eating Christmas supper that afternoon. Caroline opened the door and heard the doorbell ring. There was a dude. "Caroline?" His voice faltered a little. A long time has passed. David, Noah's dad. After reading about Noah's talent in the press, he had abruptly reached out to her. Calmly, Caroline remarked, "You can't enter. For a period of 5 years. Not even a touch. No child support. What are you here for now? I am entitled to certain privileges." David spoke louder. "My son is that boy." Just then, Richard showed up at the door. "There are no rights for you." His tone was severe. Not ethically, nor legally. The father of the Bradshaw family's stately presence made David wince for a minute, but he swiftly said, "I'll talk to the media." The true father of the brilliant youngster rejected acknowledgement. Calmly, Richard said, "Feel free. But first, everything you have done in the past, including becoming pregnant and leaving a 17-year-old girl, will be made public." David's face turned red, and he finally walked away. He then faced legal issues for child support once it was discovered that he had committed the same error with another young woman. Delinquency throughout several states. Noah had gone to sleep on Christmas night. Richard, Eleanor, and Caroline sat in the living room. Caroline said, "I haven't forgiven you completely, but I want to go on for Noah's sake, gradually." Richard clasped his wife's hand and nodded. Outside the window, we experienced the same emotions. With anticipation for the new year, the snow continued to fall in silence. Bit by bit, seeds of transformation started to germinate in their hearts.